questions are on your heart today? What whys are you asking? What hows? What whats? What questions do you bring with you into this space? In our story today with Jesus, he's been in the temple area debating theology with a lot of different people. And most of those questions weren't questions where they were asking for the real answer. They were trying to fool or trick Jesus into saying something that would make the political authorities angry. But in this question, it says that there was one person there in that crowd. One who had been listening to the discussions, the theology debates, the philosophy tracks that took them down rabbit holes, who had listened to Jesus' answers, and because of those answers, had decided he was going to ask his question. And so this question isn't from one of the ones who is trying to set Jesus up, make him fail. This isn't one of the questions that is meant to cause the authorities to arrest him. This isn't a trick question. The one who comes today comes with a real sincere question, wants to know what's at the center of faith. What is it that draws us closer to God? How are we to live our lives? What's the most important thing that we need to know about our belief, our faith in God? And so we ask, which commandment is the first of all? So, I know we think that means he's asking which of the 10 commandments is the best commandment, but that whole book, that whole section of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy has a multitude of commandments. The law is ever present in that book, in the Torah. And so asking which one is the most important means narrowing down from, 700 questions down to one. Which commandment is the most important? And so Jesus begins his answer with the Shema. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul, with all your mind. I think about this one often because the last renters in my house were Jewish. And so they put the little sort of prayer boxes on all the doorways. So they took almost all of them down, except they missed the one in the garage. But I can see where they used to be, so whatever door I walk into in my house, I think about this commandment. How do I love the Lord my God? With everything, right? I mean, this commandment covers all the bases, not just with your mind or your belief, not just with your heart, but with your soul and with your body. It asks you to love God with all that you are. What does that look like, to love God with all you are? I wish I had an easy answer for this, because to love God completely takes different forms for different people, because we all approach how we connect to God in different ways. For some of us, that connection comes through music. And it's the songs we listen to and sing and play that draw us closer to God. For some of us, it comes through prayer and meditation. that we can sit still and be quiet and feel that centering of God. For some of us, it means we need to be active. We need to be doing something. We need to be helping someone. And that's what helps us to feel and experience God. And I think that's why Jesus puts all those different types of responses, right? Mind, soul, strength. Because Jesus knows that each of us is going to have to approach God in the way that makes the most sense to us. To love God that way. One of the things I often think about when I think about this is the lessons I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh, but also the lessons that monks and nuns can teach us. For those who live in cloistered communities, they're supposed to give their whole selves to God. And so they teach them often to say a prayer reflexively. So when their mind begins to wander to other stuff, they're drawn back to a prayer. They say the words, sometimes they use the Jesus prayer. Jesus Christ, Son of David, have mercy on me, a sinner. But the idea that they give to the monks and to the nuns that are cloistered is that phrase, that prayer that they say, is meant to remind them why they are here, to put them in the present moment, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, to make them aware of what is happening here and now, and to make them think about the divine. And then Jesus says, even though he's not asked for the next commandment, he says the second commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that's the one we need this week. Because I don't know how many of you are coming here with completely mixed emotions about what happened on Tuesday. Some of us being scared for what that means for our families because of the word mass deportation and the ways that it was not spelled out. And what does that mean for us as a community if we talk about love? How will we be the love that puts all our soul, mind, strength, and body on the line for those within our own family who may be fearful right now? How do we love our neighbors so completely, so fully in this space? This commandment, the second one, to love your neighbor as yourself. It's the one I've been thinking a lot about this week. Because if we center this commandment to love our neighbors, it asks us to take as the heart of our faith this desire to take care of, to be with, to make sure that our neighbors are welcomed and safe. And that's the heart of who we are called to be as Christians. That we take that love we have of God with everything we are, and we pour it into loving our neighbors. So this week, one of the emails that came across my files was from the BTS Center and their director. And I just want to share some of the words he shared, because they lay out what we are dealing with today in these commandments. He says, how do you who may be coming here with fear, may be coming here with mixed emotions, may be happy, may be hopeful, may be fearful. With those complicated emotions, how do we move forward in this space? And I thought his answer broke down into what happens in this commandment about God, self, and neighbor. And so one of the things he says in the love God portion is that we need to listen for the Spirit's leading. We need to tap into those practices that we know that center us. We need to tap into the wisdom and the comfort and the good guidance and the divine love. We can trust that God is with us, closer than the air we breathe, beckoning us into a world, a kingdom. There are many competing voices, but what Richard Rohr reminds us is there is a deeper voice of God which we must learn to hear and obey. It will sound like the voice of risk, of trust, of surrender, of soul, of common sense, of destiny, of love, of your deepest self. He then says, and this one I put under love God. Let's ground ourselves in those practices that sustain us. What are they for you? Prayer and meditation, making or listening to music, sitting in silence, practicing gratitude, spending time with trees. As Barbara Brown Taylor suggests, anything can become a spiritual practice once you are willing to approach it that way. Once you let it bring you to your knees and show you what is real, including who you are, who other people are, and how near God can be when you have lost your way. And then he gives some answers that talk about how we should be as a community. How we should be a space that draws strength from community. That this time where we are uncertain, but we've been there before and we know how to move forward, is not a moment to isolate. Whatever you are feeling, other people are also feeling. And we can be a space that holds each other. We can make plans to make community stronger, to do things together, to get a cup of coffee, to have dinner, to share a meal, to go for a walk, to plant a tree, to draw closer in prayer and singing, to pray together, to sit together in silence, to reflect on our sacred texts. And he says that we need to guard against hardening our hearts. In disappointing moments, it's tempting to shut down. And I don't know if you've been on social media, but most people this week have been saying, I'm done, I'm not watching the news anymore, I'm through with whichever group you don't like. I'm done. And the BTS Center director says it's tempting to do that, to succumb to cynicism and despair and heartbreak. But as Parker Palmer reminds us, there is another way to visualize what a broken heart might mean. Imagine that small clenched fist of a heart broken open into the largeness of life, into the greater capacity to hold one's own, and the world's pain and joy. Parker asks, will we hold our hearts open and keep trying to love, even as love makes us more vulnerable to the losses that break our hearts? And then he says, we have to get clear about what we stand for. That was part of what we tried to do last week, right? We created a whole bunch of things that could guide who we are becoming. Which of those stands do we want to take? Which of those stands will you support me in taking? Which of those stands will we do together? We need to become clear about what we stand for. We're invited to stand with God, to love God with everything we have, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. And in these next months and years, that means we have to be clear about who God and Jesus are calling us to be. Not let the politics of the world influence that call, but let the call of God influence our politics. Let the call of God push us and pull us into the places where our neighbors are in need. So I thought it was serendipitous that we all were pushed to grow a garden today, because it's pushing us to say this is what we care about. That even as the world is talking about drill, baby, drill, we're saying that if we just plant one bush, one flower, one native plant, we start bringing back the pollinators and the microorganisms on the, I can't ever say that, but the fungi under the dirt. We start bringing back the earth as it used to be, as it can be, as it should be. We start bringing back the garden that God created it to be. And it gives us hope that that space where we are pulling the non-natives out of and letting the natives come back becomes a space where we can stop, get a bench, which we're going to have to do eventually because they're all down at this end. Get a bench so that people can come and sit there and reconnect to that first part. The love God with everything you are. That as they watch the hummingbirds and the bees and the butterflies, as they watch the flowers bloom, they can see and feel and experience the presence of God, the presence of their non-human neighbors. So this week and month and year is going to be challenging for all of us. And let's, as a church, figure out how we will stand together as a community that loves God with everything we are and loves our neighbors here in these pews and our neighbors there beyond the walls. Amen.